Good afternoon. Once again, thank you for coming back. You have perseverance because you spent 3 days, or will have spent 3 days listening to someone who has no training in rhetoric, so I appreciate you coming back. Just to recap on the first couple of days, the educators that I highlighted were men who were, I think, representative of the centuries that they lived in. Rousseau being an Enlightenment thinker, the one who had the most influence on American education. Certainly he is not the Enlightenment thinker that had the most influence on the American political situation, but as far as education, his book, Emile, has vastly influenced American education. Horace Mann, of course, the government model of state-controlled education and state-directed curricula, which the Lutheran schools have copied, adding a few religion classes to the curriculum. Dewey, the father of progressive education, methods used to transform education so that society might be transformed into a more perfect socialist society. And then, of course, Bill Ayers, being the representative of the 21st century postmodern education as we have currently in our own government institutions. Something I would really hope that you take from the history of these men is the influence of pastors. Don't ever underestimate the influence you have pastors on the young men and young women, but the young men especially in your congregations. If you remember Rousseau, who was so influential on him? Some of these more liberal Catholic priests that tutored him and talked to him. Man, being led astray by William Ellery Channing, the great Unitarian, and Dewey, of course, his pastor when he was a teenager, Louis Brastow, kind of the switch, I think, between orthodoxy and heterodoxy in his life and such. So pastors, please never underestimate the influence that you might be having on the young men that are under your influence. There is a direct line, I believe, from these guys and our loss of educational excellence in America and through into our Lutheran schools. And I just want to take, if there's nothing you learned from these 3 days, please take this home with you, that we cannot divorce our educational methods and our ways of teaching from the philosophies that spawned them. It's important to look back. Why are we doing this? What is it going to accomplish? Who are the people that advocated and what did they want to accomplish through that? So I think if we take that into consideration, we're going to be a little more discerning than we have been in the past when we just adopt anything just because it seems to be trendy or everyone's doing it or somebody tells us it's the best practice. There were some questions yesterday after my lecture that I think I need to clarify a few things. So if you would turn to that chart, the contrasting chart, please, under methodology, and I'll just comment on a few things so you can make some notes if you think it would be helpful. Under methodology, if you see that, the third one down, developmentally appropriate versus the trivium is methodology. Everybody see that? I think I did a very poor job of explaining that yesterday. I think that preposition is probably wrong. What I'd like to change it to is look at the trivium maybe to methodology as you're looking at the trivium. See its application to the methodology, or the methodology applied over and against the trivium. So that was a poor preposition. Sorry about that. I hope this makes it a little more clear. What I mean by that is look at young children who are learning grammar, particularly in things like languages or mathematics or what. Direct instruction, recitation, those are the best types of things to teach that part of the trivium. I give you one example of this. When Bill and I were in Canada, there was a woman, public school teacher, and this made the news for several days in a row, and she was lionized because she had organized this campaign across Canada to get second and third, fourth graders to write letters to the Brazilian government in protest for the rainforest deforestation in the Amazon. And she was just lionized. People, isn't this wonderful? The children are showing their enthusiasm and their heart for real issues, and this is portrayed as critical thinking. Okay, that's total flip-flop. Okay, if you were a classical teacher and you were going to be dealing with that kind of thing, what would you be doing? At the younger grades, you would be teaching them how to spell Brazil, Amazon. They would be learning maps. They would be learning about the climate. They would be reading documents. They would learn about the government and who makes policy for such. And then maybe when they're older, they can research these things and they have discussions and arguments and perhaps in high school level actually present something and make their case for this. So that's the way we do it in a classical school. But in a progressive school, it's just the opposite. They're trying to force little ones who really don't have the capacity to do this analytical thinking, and then they call it critical thinking, or they call it, you're really doing a great job, look at how deep these children are thinking. That's a code word too, deep thinking, that's in Common Core, you hear that a lot. Have any of you looked at Common Core and seen that word? Okay. Well, we're really getting deep into the curriculum. Okay, watch that one. So does that make more sense with the trivium as methodology thing? Okay. The next one, let me comment one more thing I missed on that. Why is that done and why is that so typical of progressive education? It's because of what John Dewey actually taught about what the curriculum should be. He said, since we are trying to create this collaborative society where we work together for the common good, the curriculum or the content of what we're teaching should be current events. It should be issues that are driving society. And so when we see that in public schools, this emphasis on whatever issue happens to be a hot topic, whether it be environmentalism or what it is, it's going to be something else 5 years from now. This is perfectly in line with progressive thinking, totally in line with what they believe the curriculum should be. It's out with the old. We don't need the past. We don't need our Western civilization. That's old. That's over with. What we need is children who can discuss and really get involved with the current events of the day. Okay? So it does. There's a source for that. It goes right to Dewey on it. What you have in a situation like that is you have the curriculum, or I shouldn't be using that word because that messed us up yesterday, but content is just a vehicle for the attitude that you want the children to have, or their activism. And I did mention this the other day. I said something about, a progressive educator might argue with you, well, we're teaching about ancient history. What do you mean? Is that so unique with classical schools? Their ancient history is used as a vehicle to teach other attitudes and behaviors and proper activism. Okay? A different way of looking at it. Okay? All right, B, I'd like to comment a little on the tables for collaborative work, and this won't take long. But, that's on the next page. Tables versus the individual desk. This is just for teachers. Obviously, that just means specifically for little kids. Where are tables really good in teaching?
Lunchroom?
Lunchroom. No. Yeah, they're, older children, yes. Having a Socratic discussion, or high school kids who are, discussing issues back and forth. That's when the table thing is fine. When it's bad is when you've got little children who are trying to concentrate and they're distracted, and you want them to do their work themselves. And that's why I said that lady from Plano, I don't think she's here, but she had it right. She stuck with the table and she put up the little privacy folders, so her children would not be distracted on their tests. So this isn't a hard and fast rule, you can't sit at a table or you can't sit at a desk or something like that. But most of us in our schools, we've inherited this whole idea that the little kids all sit at the tables and then the big kids have their individual desks. Really better, it's switched. It's better to have it the other way around. Okay? That's just a little practical thing. Okay? All right, third one that I wanted to clear up is the current situation in the public schools regarding, here it is in the next page, curriculum, about 3 or 4 down. Teachers evaluated on the basis of their success in the curriculum. Let me clarify something about that, too. What I'm talking about, or I should say what I'm not referring to, is the situation that we've had in the public schools actually over the last 20 to 25 years or so, where the teachers are basically just a technician, and they're given, you know, every few years they're given a new curriculum and, you know, tons of paperwork, and, you know, you make sure that they check these boxes and such. That's all part of the whole outcome-based education background. No Child Left Behind was really bad on that. Teachers were loaded with things that they were expected to make sure that, you know, kids learn. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the public school situation. What I am talking about here is I'm talking about a problem that I have observed in Lutheran schools, and I'm not talking about classical necessarily either, but where there is no accountability in regards to the curriculum. And I've honestly heard this many times. You know, the teacher will say, well, you know, I only got halfway through the math book this year, you know, that kind of stuff. And then what happens to the you know, if that's a third grade teacher, what does a fourth grade teacher do? You have this snowball effect of dumbing down, and it's very difficult for the teachers in the upper grades, and I am very sensitive to junior high teachers who have to inherit kids that younger grade teachers failed really to teach the basics to, and then you're trying to deal with them. It's a very difficult situation. So that is what I'm talking about when I'm saying teachers need to be evaluated on the basis of their success in teaching the curriculum, not that you got to do A, B, C, D, or else you're out. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, last one is academic rigor. That is on the previous page again, just to clarify that.
Question?
Yes. Yes.
Under curriculum, the very bottom left, it looks like something got cut off. Deconstruction plus correct.
I think it's on the next page, plus correct value.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, academic rigor, it's characterized by challenging material. Work must be challenging enough for all students, not just the kids in the middle. Otherwise, you're handicapping them, and they're going to find it difficult to apply themselves when they really have to later on. And again, this is kind of counter to the traditional thing we were told about teaching the bell curve. Well, just teach the middle, and some of them are going to lose it, they're not going to get it, and others are going to be sitting there bored. No, you need, as a teacher, to use your creativity and know where your students are at to challenge every one of them. Another thing is you don't want to equate long hours of homework alone with academic rigor. And we do want, as a classical teacher, we want our kids to do homework at night. They need to be studying and working. But just giving, you know, 25 pages of workbook assignment or something, that's not really academic rigor. So make sure that, and that's kind of a rookie mistake, really, for a new teacher. You have a hard time gauging how much the students can actually do each night, you know, but you learn that through experience. But rigor is not just long hours. It's hours with the correct, challenging material, okay? One of the things that I would say I noticed in terms of this academic rigor is that the problems, when we think of academic rigor, we think of high school and kids working hard and, you know, this difficult stuff. But I think it really starts in the lower elementary. You know, and I see a red flag if I look at a school and they're still teaching phonics in 4th grade, you know, the reading level is really low on the books, you know, that this is where it starts, and it can have, again, a snowball effect on the older kids, because then you have a high school teacher that, boom, you know, is giving rigorous work, and they're not ready for it because they've not been properly prepared with the proper foundation. So, that one. All right, what I'd like you to do with this, and with those items, too, about the ideas that were expressed by Rousseau, Dewey, Mann, etc., use them as a mirror to yourself and your school. Some of them will not apply. Some of them you've got it down, no problem. But change the wording if you want. There's nothing copyrighted on this chart. Tweak it any way you want, and take it and use it just as a helpful mirror to your own teaching. All right, next thing, and that's a little wrap-up. Next thing for the rest of the day, the topics are going to be, what are some of the impediments and challenges that we have as a classical Lutheran school? I think all of us may be somewhat proud, or at least I know we've read things produced by our synod, and we're proud that we're the largest Protestant school system in America, right? That's a bragging point, isn't it? Yes. Okay. But we have to realize we're also the largest progressive private school system in America, okay? The departments of education in our Concordias, they not only mirror, but sometimes they even exceed the radicalism in some state universities. And I was looking a couple days before this conference, I was looking at the requirements for a Doctor of Education at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, and I was contrasting it to Concordia University, River Forest. It was amazing. Which one was the most conservative? Sam Houston State University. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. You know, we have this kind of radical education philosophy in our schools, and it's kind of a syncretism, because on one hand we have our theologically orthodox faculty over here in the theology department, and then we have a totally radical education department, and it just doesn't fit. And I think we know that as classical educators. That's why we're here. Let me read a quote, which I think is just an absolutely beautiful quote. I read it last year, and you pastors are well aware of this. You've heard it, so bear with me. And it's called On Error in the Church. And it's by Charles Porterfield Krauss. It's taken from the Conservative Reformation and the Theology, 1871. It's not in your packet, so you have to listen. Okay. When error is admitted into the church, it will be found that the stages of its progress are always three. It begins by asking toleration. Its friends say to the majority, "You need not be afraid of us, we are few and weak. Only leave us alone. We shall not disturb the faith of others." The church has her standards of doctrine. Of course, we will never interfere with them. We only ask for ourselves to be spared interference with our private opinions. Indulge in this for a time, error goes on to assert equal rights. Truth and error now become two balancing forces. The church shall do nothing which looks like deciding between them. That would be a partiality. It is bigotry to assert any superior right to the truth. We are to agree to differ, and any favoring of the truth because it is truth is partisanship. What the friends of truth and error hold in common is now fundamental. Anything on which they differ is ipso facto non-essential. And anyone who makes an account of such thing is a disturber of the peace of the church. Truth and error are now two coordinate powers, and the great secret of church statesmanship is to preserve the balance between them. From this point on, error soon goes to its natural end, which is to assert supremacy. Truth started with tolerating, it comes to be merely tolerated, and that only for a time. Error claims a preference for its judgments on all disputed points. It puts men into positions not at first in spite of their departure from the church's faith, but in consequence of it. And I think that last line really describes someone like John Dewey, who the more he left the faith and became a more outspoken atheist, the higher he rose in society and in academia. So, as you think about that quote, to think about us as classical educators. We now find ourselves in the minority within our full church body education system. We're now kind of on the outside looking in, and we're trying to claw our way back in. We need to keep that in mind, and we need to not be afraid, be faithful in the places that God has placed us. So, having said that about the Concordias, I'd like to say something else about that, because I think that is probably our biggest challenge right now as classical educators, is where we get our teachers. For 15 years, we've been trying to find them anywhere we can, and we have to do a lot of serious vetting of our staff to get people that are on board. And I think we need to start making a little bit more noise about the kind of education that we want, the teachers that we want, and do it to our Concordias. When I say these things, I really want you to realize that I am not condemning the many good people that are working in our Concordia universities. And I have some very, very wonderful experiences of people that were very helpful to me, and I learned a lot from at Seward, and you can say the same thing. We all have our loyalties to our alma mater, and we all have to be faithful wherever God has placed us. And if that means you're the only person in the midst of a bunch of progressive teachers, then okay, then you're faithful there. And so we need to thank God for those people that maybe have influenced us in many ways. But nevertheless, the existence of these faithful people does not negate the fact that we have a real problem in education departments in our Concordias. It's not a matter of balancing it out, and I've heard that excuse, maybe we want to make ourselves feel good that way. Well, we've got a good theology department over there, so, that's all right. We got Dr. Korchak is there, so he can outbalance Isabella Nunez or whatever. Dr. Veek is going to change Mequon, But we can't expect one person to bear the burden of all of this. It's time for us to start stepping up, I think. Interesting thing, a couple of months ago, and I have been following this for a year, been following, what the Concordia Universities are doing in terms of what they expect of their education graduates, the kind of classes they have to take, how many credit hours, and so forth. So, I'll give you my opinion on what I was able to find. By far, if you had nothing else to judge a school by other than, for an education degree, other than, well, what do they require, education courses, whatever, which one is going to be most compatible with our classical education, there's really only one. That's Irvine. That's the best one of all of them that we have available right now. I'm not saying that's perfect, but that's a fact. You get a liberal studies major in addition to your education degree there. You have to take a subject matter exam, and what was I going to say on that? Anyway, Irvine is the best one. Okay, Irvine is by far the best one in terms of classical, sort of classical. Okay. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Least number of quack education classes there, okay? Least number of them. The Hall of Shame is Ann Arbor and Chicago, okay? These are the ones that are going to be the most postmodern and the most radical in what they require. Let me give you an example of some workshops that were offered and then they were later canceled, maybe lack of attendance, I don't know, at our armor this summer. One, building written perseverance in your students, that comes straight from the Common Core document. Workshops on the 20th century transformational and transactional leaders. Facilitating restorative justice. Using high-quality children's literature to achieve the Common Core, and so forth. Look at the packet, and you'll see the one that says Concordia Ann Arbor. I stuck that in there just as an example of what we call formalism, and that education is only about strategies and processes and the way you do things, not what you're teaching. Okay? And I think this is a brilliant example of that. It's written by I believe the Campus Dean of School of Education. And I'm not going to go through this. You can do this at home, but the interesting thing to me about this was, this is where our Christian, Lutheran teachers are being trained, and there's not a word in here about Christ or about Christian education. It's all progressive practice. Yeah. The only allusion to it is we are to walk in the footsteps of the master teacher. Okay. Now that isn't even our pastors would probably say that isn't even Jesus is our example that we follow. No. There's some problems there. And I don't know if that's because Michigan, was one of the first states, if not the first, to establish the Prussian model, of education. I don't know the history of it, but anyway, they have a lot of bureaucracy there with this at NRN. Maybe Dr. Calvert could comment on that later, being from Michigan.
You're doing fine.
Okay. The next one, look at is, at the top it says transformational vision of schooling. This is the new postmodern, which postmodern education is basically just the natural child expressive education. The idea that we are going to use the schools to transform America into a more just, socialist society. Okay. I will read the first couple of paragraphs. This is for an MA in urban schooling at the Concordia University, Chicago. This program prepares you, the educational professional, for work as a change agent in your classroom, school, and broader educational arena. Developed for the engaged, passionate educator committed to a transformational vision of schooling, this degree equips you with the knowledge-based skill sets and critical perspectives needed for successful practice and advocacy in a variety of educational settings. That's gobbledygook, but can you read through, read through the lines? You know what that means? In a political and policy climate that encourages and praises direct instruction methods, skills-based learning, and accountability through testing, this program is situated within the democratic theories of education and is designed to provide you with the tools to engage in meaningful and creative conversations about the short-term and long-term consequences of today's climate. And then it goes on. So, you're going to be a change agent. Your job is to go out and create, to teach these kids to be community activists and change society. That's your job as a teacher. Yes, Alicia.
Change, right?
What?
Climate change.
Yeah, whatever the issue is. Yeah. Okay, so these are examples of extreme progressivism in our Concordia University. Just a few others. Compare Austin and Selma. Selma requires a total of 3 theology classes to get a Lutheran teacher's diploma. Isn't that great? I think I have something like 20 or so from Seward, and that's about what an SMP pastor has today. And this is extremely limited. Austin requires more. They require 6 classes, including a history of the Reformation, which is good. Portland has a weird thing, and this might be an Oregon state requirement. I don't know. Is there anyone here from Oregon? Okay. They eliminated the essential skills test for teachers, the basic skills test, but the students there in the Lutheran education program are required to get passing scores on a civil rights test. Whatever that is, I don't know. But do you see the trend, and do you see how different this is from what we want to achieve in classical education? We are light years apart. And yet we're all supposed to be under this big happy tent together as Lutheran educators. So I think we have some battles, and we need to start fighting them, okay? The question about that, why is it that way? I mean, why have we done that? We did it because we wanted to emulate what Horace Mann did with the normal schools, and we just copied it. We copied whatever public education was doing, whatever they were requiring to become a teacher, and then we tacked a few theology courses on the end of it. That's what we have today in Lutheran education. To please everybody?
Please everybody, please come to our school.
Well, I think it's more about pleasing the government. We want this, we want this on our shoulder. Look at all the letters we have after our school. We're certified by this, we're certified by that.
Once you go into the certification, then you have to please them.
Well, you do, and that is a problem too with different states. So, like, for example, if you're in Wyoming, I think it's pretty good. You don't have to do all this nonsense. But if you're in some of these other states, you do. I think Iowa's about the bad one for that, for private schools. I'm not an expert on that, but it does vary from state to state, how much of this government requirement you're going to have on your back. The thing you want to ask yourself when we go after all these different certifications, and yeah, it makes us look good, like you said, Ruth, parents look at it and they're impressed. And wow, you're certified by all these entities. Are these entities institutions or entities that we share common values with? And if not, why are you trying to get their approval? Okay? It's beyond me. It really is beyond me why we would want to have these kind of approval things from these entities. We have nothing in common with them in terms of our goals of education, in terms of the way we want our teachers to teach, any of it. I understand. And my husband and I have had a lot of discussion on this. I understand the NLSA, that, it's easier, it keeps the state off your back, You can deal with NLSA, you don't have to deal with the state of Texas or whatever, wherever you're from. They're a lot happier people to deal with than if you have some kind of a government bureaucrat down the back. But it's still a problem. I think we're bringing things into our schools by constantly doing that. When you bring in a teacher that has gone through this kind of education program, you're bringing those ideas into your school, whether they really know it or not, and then you have to retrain that teacher. So you're going through a lot of effort. I don't know. I have a real hard time with this panting after all these state accreditation agencies. And that's me. Many of you sitting here may disagree with me on that, but I think it has caused problems, and it causes problems in our classical schools too. Okay? So that's what I consider to be a huge problem. Second one I want to talk about is Common Core, and I just want to run through this really quickly if I can. Not that our classical schools are trying to emulate Common Core, but we hear about it. I mean, I was at a curriculum meeting in Houston, and somebody on the board wanted us to look at Common Core. So it's out there. Parents are going to come and ask you, well, does your school meet all the requirements of Common Core, whatever. I think it'd be an easy thing to answer that we exceed all the academic requirements of Common Core. I don't even think you'd have to even check, really, to see if you did. What you don't want to agree with, what you don't want to do in terms of the requirements of Common Core are their affective requirements for values and behaviors, and all of their record keeping that they're requiring. That's what we don't want to have to deal with. Anyway, let me give you a little history on that. The advocacy of government-controlled curriculum goes way back. It goes back as far as Plato, because the government wants to use the schools to create good citizens for the state. And we see that as a natural thing of government, okay? We got these ideas imported to the United States from the guys that were impressed with the Prussian education system. Horace Mann, of course, instituting them. And then as Lutheran schools, we copied their programs and added theology onto it. In LCMS circles, and I mentioned this yesterday, Luther is often given the blame for this, or the credit. Luther says we have to support the government schools or whatever. I hope I made that clear that, no, Luther said that Luther needed the support of the government. The princes were the ones who were supporting Reformation. It wasn't the church. So these were his natural allies, and it was a totally different situation coming off of medieval Europe with these institutions. In the United States, we had laissez-faire parent or community-controlled or church-run schools until Mann in Massachusetts created this bureaucracy out of nothing over the state of Massachusetts and said, okay, now we're going to be in charge of your schools. And this spread all over the United States. Everyone went along with it because they didn't want to be considered to be against an educated public, the crusade against ignorance. Now the government's taken it to the next level. It's not just states. It's now the federal government is wanting to have permanent impact and control of our schools. And so that is a fight right now that I think Christians who are involved in public education can make a difference and try and temper some of these things and fight them. I don't know that we in classical schools need to waste our time with it, with Common Core, unless you have some kind of an issue with your state that this is something you have to do to keep open or something. I think that, we have so much more to do and so much more to work on with classical education that why bother with all this stuff? In 5 years, it's going to be named something else. It's going to be another program that's very similar. 2009, for example, the Congress passed the stimulus bill, and what was included in that stimulus bill was this database collection for information on all parents and students and such. 2008, Common Core. 2001, we had No Child Left Behind. 1999, Goals 2000, which came out of the Clinton administration. That was, I think, one of the first ones, and I might not be right on this, that really tied federal money to, okay, you do this, and you follow our federal program, and then we will give you money from the state. All of them have low academic standards. In fact, even Common Core today, you get people in teachers' unions and public school teachers saying this is even worse than before, you know? Not an improvement, okay? A lot of affective goals for behavior, and like I was saying yesterday, really public education as it was originally thought of was seen as kind of a behavior modification. Let's get kids to have certain attitudes so they will become activists and you know, whatever, become involved in their communities and such. And even before that, there was values clarification. So I'm going back kind of long. People that are my age probably remember fighting those values clarification battles when our kids were little. 46 states, I think, initially signed on to Common Core, and now everybody's having, there's a lot of them, or I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of them are trying to back out. Texas was not one of them. Texas voted 140 to 2 against Common Core. Michigan and Indiana, I think, are on the way out, and I don't, you know.
Michigan is still in it, and Indiana's out.
Indiana's out, Michigan is still in it. Okay, thank you. If you read the list, these others, South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, South Dakota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. You're seeing a lot of red states and a few purple states. So you see that it's connected politically, but anytime the government is involved in education, it is going to be political. You're not going to get away from it. It just is, and it's going to be whoever's in charge. That's the program they're going to push. So, as far as Texas goes, I think our state, our issue was not so much the low standards of Common Core, but states' rights. And that's where the big issue is now. It's a constitutional issue argument. Who's really should be controlling government education, states, or the federal government. So that's an issue on Common Core. One of the things that the Common Core people in the Obama administration have been very successful in doing is they have been able to force these Common Core standards on other entities, such as the ACT and the SAT testing, the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, Stanford Achievement Test, the GED, and these kind of things. So then somehow money's connected to that, and so now they are basing their tests on those. And in many years past, those tests were sort of seen to be somewhat, they tried to make them neutral, not connected to anything like that. Now they are totally tied to Common Core. So textbook publishers are all jumping on the bandwagon. You have to prove how you meet all the Common Core standards. It's follow the money, follow the money on this. And so the question is, do we want to get involved in all this as a private school, private classical school? I think most of you would probably say no, And like I said, this is people in public education. We need Christians in public education, too, to make a difference and try and fight some of these things. We need to be faithful wherever we are. We can't, maybe it's a losing battle, but we need to be faithful. And so Christians who are in there trying to deal with this kind of stuff, they need our moral support, too. One of the arguments for Common Core is, I'll say Arne Duncan, Secretary of Education, has said, well, we have an education crisis in America because we have 50 different states and we have 50 different standards, and what we must have is everyone has the same standards. Who does that sound like? It's Horace Mann all over again, isn't it? Yeah. And his belief is that the federal government, not the state government, not the local city or town, and certainly not the parents, are the ones who should set the criteria for it. And this criteria should be in conjunction with international benchmarks. So we're moving into this internationalism too. What Common Core does is it sets standards for math and English mostly. Supposedly it's supposed to be internationally competitive, and which is interesting because they're using this word competitive. We're going to be competitive with other countries. But what do they tell you in the education department? When you're teaching kids, competition isn't good. See the difference there? The emphasis is going to be on critical thinking skills, and what that is a formalism. We're going to teach you a strategy. It's not logic, sound foundation of knowledge to make good judgment, anything like that. It's going to emphasize cooperative learning and not the concrete standards. As I said before, function over content. Main purpose is we need worker bees for the government. It's all about jobs. Remember in ancient Greece, that people who were trained for jobs were the slaves, whereas if you were trained to be a leader in society, you got a classical education. And this parallels that too. We need people to work computers, you know, or whatever it is, you know. 100 years ago, we need people to work in factories. Okay, now it's all about computer literacy and such. And, you know, 50 years from now, it'll be something else, I'm sure. One of the things that'll come up, if you start questioning Common Core, well, you know, what are you, some kind of conspiracy theorist? Is this just all a socialist plot, you know, to take over the government or something? So follow the rabbit trails in this. Read who these people are connected to, connect the organizations, read the documents, and if you just keep following it and following it and following it, that's exactly where you get. That the people that are pushing this, you know, they are ones who want to turn the United States into a socialist country. So why should we be upset about that, though? Isn't that the same thing that Dewey did, and isn't that the same thing that Horace Mann wanted? This is not anything that's, you know, socialism. This is exactly what we should expect. It's what they have always done. The difference is they don't usually tell the worker bees that that's what their purpose is. You know, it's decided by the people who are higher up. Some of the cons to Obamacare: it's costly, the graft and corruption, money laundering, like I said, follow money, mediocre standards. One big one is the privacy issue for parents, having all this data, personal questions about the families and such, and then, of course, the main one, the constitutional issue on who should be controlling the schools, the federal government or the state governments, etc. So, just an overview of Common Core. I don't know if, personally, I would not advertise that, you know, we meet all the standards of Common Core on my, if I had a school handbook, I would not. To me, as a parent, if I saw that, I'd say, oops, I'm going the other direction. I don't even want to have anything to do with that school. But, you know, this is a question that you need to take back to your church or to your school and you know, discuss if this is even an issue for you. Okay? Third one that is a problem, I believe, that we need to deal with in our LCMS schools, and I'm not just talking classical schools, I'm talking our LCMS schools, is the question of why has teaching become a totally female-dominated occupation? Anybody know? All right, it's not because of women's rights. It's not because of women's rights or, you know, job opportunities or anything like that. This was an issue that was discussed in depth by the guys in the early 1800s, Horace Mann and some of these utopian socialists like Robert Dale Owen, his son, and they didn't agree on it. Okay, some of them said, well, we don't want women teaching because they just end up being dominated by the clergy, and the pastors are going to influence them and tell them what to do. So we don't want that. You know, these weak-minded women are going to be influenced by clergymen and pastors. See, you know, they were atheists. Others said, yes, you know, we want women in there because these young girls maybe are kind of like willing dupes. We'll put them in the normal schools and they'll teach exactly the way they're taught to teach and they won't know any better. So there was this argument going on. When Dewey came along, he actually said, yes, young women are the best ones to teach because they have this nurturing mother-hen atmosphere, or mother-hen attitude, and so they're the best ones to teach children. I guess the question I'm asking you to think about is that the model that you see teachers in your school, or do you see them as training kids to be warriors, to fight for the faith when they are adults? You know, which model, you know, what are you trying to achieve with your kids in your school? Basically what happened in the LCMS, I think, was that the role of the father, and you should talk to Dr. Steve Heine about this too, he can say it much more eloquently than I can. The role of the father as teaching, being the spiritual teacher of the family, has pretty much been replaced by the female Sunday school teacher and the female day school teacher. Now, does that mean that we should no longer have women teachers, or that men are better teachers than women or something? No, absolutely not. But we do need to realize that our young boys need a male mentor. They can't be under women all the time. And my husband has talked to me about the little boys at Memorial in Houston, how these little ones that are in the daycare and in the preschool, they just kind of swarm around him when he goes down there. And he said, I don't think I'm the only man they see, you know, all day long. They're dropped off at 6:30 in the morning, somebody picks them up at 6:30 at night, and they rarely see their dad. Pastor Heine is the only man they ever see. And so think about that as you're thinking about the complexion of the staff, you know, and the need for the young boys to see someone standing up being a spiritual leader. And I'm not criticizing women at all for being teachers. Obviously, I'm one, you know, a woman and such. So I'm not saying that women shouldn't be teaching. I'm just saying that we desperately need that in our church body. And you know, that changed. That changed. In 1999, our oldest daughter was getting ready for high school, and so we went down to Concordia, St. Paul's High School, boarding school, to kind of check it out. And I was asking everyone about the academic standards. This is kind of an offshoot of that. And I asked 5 different people, you know, what are the academic standards at the school? And this was in the follow-up of the synod cutting off money, and so St. Paul's College was no more, and they were on their own, and the faculty obviously changed, and everybody gave me kind of the PR thing, great school, you know, great, excellent school, that you always hear no matter what school you ask about. And one lady finally, she said, well, what do you think? And she was kind of short when she said it. What do you think? She said, before, we were totally staffed by people that had PhDs and PhDs, and they had vast knowledge. Now we have young girls who just came out of Seward. What do you think happened to the academic standards here? You know? And this gets back kind of to the academic rigor point, and I'll backtrack to that. If we want to have our students be scholars, we need to be scholars too, as teachers. For those of us like me standing up here, and probably most of you there, you are not classically trained. We're trying to recover something that we never had. We're trying to pass it on to our kids. And so we have to do it like self-education now, you know, and if that's what we have to do, we need to do it, and we need to be an example to our students that way. So really, too, in terms of hiring and such, that isn't really so much a male-female thing, but in the past, our schools were staffed by guys that came out of the universities that had studied theology and languages. And now we have people, and that includes me and some of you others, we had what was probably the equivalent of a community college education plus 2 years of garbage progressive education classes and some psychology. And that was the model that Horace Mann set up, okay? We don't want our teachers in these universities. We want to have a special school of education, and we are going to pick this curriculum, and it's going to be psychology and methods, okay? And that's what we inherited, and we've never, I mean, I never questioned it. Did you when you were in school? No. But now, as we learn more about classical education, we see how deficient that really was. And I think it's great that there are so many people here, because for 15 years, that's what CCLE has been trying to do, is to help us educate ourselves so we can educate our children. So, problem with that in terms of staff, in terms of academic rigor, and in terms of female-dominated staff. And I hope, you know, if I was a man up here, I probably couldn't say that, you know. I'd get eggs or something. But I'll say it since... let's see, let's go. We've got 5 more minutes. Let me bring up one more issue that I think is kind of erupting very slowly, maybe percolating is a better word, and that's this whole Sola Scriptura issue. And it's coming up again. It's kind of like Seminex all over again, but it's very quiet and such. When the Sola Scriptura, when the authority of the Scripture is attacked, it comes from 3 points. It comes from the textual critics, and that's what affects the pastors or, you know, the high-level theologians. That, you know, it's never really an issue at the lay level in the congregation or anything, but pastors know about it. You know, they study those kind of things. It comes through evolution, which is totally pervasive in progressive education, and we have it even in our Lutheran schools. And that affects more the kids, high school kids, college kids, even younger than that. So that's an attack on Sola Scriptura. And then the biblical chronology. And I bring this up because I want to ask you, how many of you put timelines in your classrooms? Some of you probably do. And have you ever checked to see if your timeline coordinates with the timeline in the next class over? Okay? You need to do that if you haven't, because it's all over the map out there. Write this down. This is something I'd like pastors especially to investigate. Okay? 3 Bibles, our 3 synodical Bibles over the past 60, 70 years. 1946, Concordia Bible, published by CPH. Okay? 1986, Concordia Self-Study Bible, NIV version. And then 2009, the Lutheran Study Bible. Okay, now go into those, I'm not going to talk about this is something you need to research, but go into all the notes concerning age of the earth, dating, look up what they say about Chronicles, about Genesis, in all the footnotes. And you will see a discrepancy in what has been taught. And what you will see is you will see something going from, this is what God's Word says, to, there's lots of gaps, and there's lots of, could be questioned, and you'll have the secular dating system actually in the Lutheran Study Bible version, okay? But pastors need to look this up, they need to talk to their staff about it, and you guys on teachers need to be, all speaking from the same page on that. For example, I think the Susan Wise Bauer books use the kind of a secular timeline, which is an older Earth. It's not millions of years, but it's an older dating. So, when were the pyramids? 3500 BC, 2400 BC? These are history questions that you as teachers need to struggle with, and you need to get it down, what you're doing in your school with that. So that's an issue that's coming up. It's something that has bothered me. I was just shocked when I read some. Are you kidding me? What are you teaching your children about these kind of things? It's interesting too if you read some books on biblical chronology, and I don't know of any LCMS guy that's really some expert in chronology. Do you, pastors?
Andrew Simon.
Yeah.
He's the one that wrote the notes for the 2009 Lutheran Study Bible. He's referenced as the author of that, or the credit goes to him. Anybody else that you know of? Okay. Of course, we're all probably familiar with the Archbishop James Ussher 4004 BC date as the creation of the world. It's interesting, Melinda evidently went through that and tried to figure it out on his own too, and he came very close. He came up with something like 3964, Guys that have tried to figure it out, actually, by using Scripture alone, come very close. And some of these issues are, did his son serve concurrently with him for a couple of years, So there aren't, millions of years, thousands of years difference in these things. But it's not as easy as it sounds, to figure out the chronology of the earth from the Scripture. But it does have a lot of cross-checks in it. Anyway, please look that up and, discuss it with your faculty so you know what's being taught, or what you want to teach on that. I don't want to be dogmatic on what you should do, but another thing, are any of you familiar with the book Streams of Civilization? It's an oblong book, and it's pretty good, for ancient history for younger kids. But even in some of these very conservative books, there are these little evolutionary comments like, in the Stone Ages, men were hunter-gatherers, and, they're not starting out with Adam as being the pinnacle of creation. They're starting with Adam as being this runt, So as a history teacher, too, I would urge you to go through your books and, see what you've actually got. Don't just blindly teach them, know what you believe and teach what you believe. Okay, Pastor says the time is almost up. Is there a question? Yes. Yes, sir.
I'm a recent Concordia Chicago graduate.
Okay.
I worked in the Writing Center, and I helped a lot of those graduate education students out, actually, because they came in to help because they couldn't write.
Really?
And, well, my question is, how do you suggest that we educate those in Concordia and other churches and schools who just don't know about this stuff? I know several people who are really well-intending, they really just want to be the best Lutherans they can be, but they have never heard of this. And I'm just, for me personally, when I found out about this, I was enraged. I thought I was a good student, I thought I was doing really well, and then there's this whole world I didn't find out about. How do we share that with other people without sounding like we're a club, like we're an elite group? Because that's the complaint I'm hearing.
Well, you know, since you're at Chicago, I would try and tell people to take Dr. Korchak's class to get started with. I mean, that's a pretty basic, obvious thing. I don't know if anyone else has a recommendation, but that would be the first thing I would tell you to do.
Okay.
Does anyone have a better idea? You know,
it would be a good thing maybe for a future year to say, how can we reach these other people? Because there are lots of people, I think, who would still be interested if we could connect with them.
Well, I've always wondered if somehow we could send people into the colleges and have a seminar or something at the universities. I don't know, that's just kind of thinking off the top of my head, but it's harder for students to come here, college students, but we might be able to send someone there. Yeah, sir.
I think that's a good idea, what you just mentioned, if they would let us come do presentations there. And the other thing is, if they're willing, to get some of the people that are being placed for field work and student teaching and so forth in our...
That's an excellent idea, yeah. Then we have a chance to mentor them. Yeah. Very good idea, yes.
I was thinking of the
Alicia?
teacher one as well, you know, we did them as student teachers in our classes, because that, I think, sells, and so I'm getting some from public, Sheridan College, and they were like, wow.
Really?
We
Yeah.
didn't know this. We're not getting as many from the Sheridan College now.
They're not recommending you? Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
It also helps as our students that we're training get older, if they do go into church work and they go to those schools, they can also be that light as well in their own classrooms with their own professors, encouraging and helping and then bringing them back.
And you know, we have to realize too, when we look at these students or these other people, think about ourselves. How many years has it taken us to reach position of our own understanding? We have to be sympathetic. This is not something you just go to a seminar and smack you've got it. It's a lot of years of work. Yes, sir.
And just have people send them to the CCLE website. You know, and if you have, you know, a good body of material there that someone can quickly look at and begin to understand, I think that would be...
Yeah, especially like for young people with their electronic. Yeah, here's a website. Start with that. Yeah.
You know, it's also interesting to note that Jeb Bush is a strong supporter of Common Core.
Can I comment on that? Because I had a very interesting, about a week ago, well, maybe 2 weeks ago, I was on an airplane from Denver to Houston, sat next to a man who was a political consultant, and he was very talkative, and so I was reading something on Common Core, and he started arguing, and he really wanted to get into a discussion about Common Core with me, and he kept bringing up Jeb Bush is a good man, you know, he's in favor of Common Core, you know, why do you not want it? And really, you know what argument he gave me? He gave me kind of the Horace Mann argument. And he said, well, you know, Jeb Bush is a good man. He's not, you know, some whacked-out socialist that's trying to destroy the country. He's conservative and, you know, he cares about education, blah, blah, blah. And, yeah, that's true. You know, he just has a different view on who should control education, probably. But his argument with Horace Mann was, you know, look at these, you know, that school is fine for you, you know, but look at these terrible schools in the inner city. They need Common Core. They need the government to come in and help them and raise them up. You know, I don't know if you have any comment or, you know, any more to say about that, but I just thought that was really interesting.
One example where the government has come into the school and raised it up.
Yeah, that should have been my quick answer.
Famous school.
Yeah. Okay, Pastor Heine says that it is time. Thank you so much for your